Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, based on wherever you're joining from. I'm your host, Ashish Ranjan. On behalf of Unicus Consultech, I welcome you all to this session titled From Climate Signals to Business Action. For those of you who have not been introduced to the firm, Unicus Consultech is a tech-enabled global consulting company that specializes in sustainability and climate consulting, accounting and reporting consulting, governance, risk and compliance, and tech consulting by leveraging high-performing global talent. For the next few minutes, I'll set the stage for our discussion today. Our argument is simple. The climate signals around us, whether it be scientific, regulatory, financial, technological, or natural, have shifted from background noise to real consequences. The question is no longer if change comes, but how we guide it and how fast. If you want to take one slide home from our discussion today, take this one. We have crossed 430 parts per million of CO2 concentration in our atmosphere, a level that has not been seen in millions of years. The WMO says there is an 86% chance we breach the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold before 2029. The IPCC told us the window is closing, and the latest data says it is closing faster than the models projected. This is not a forecast we debate. It is a fact pattern that we manage now. Look past the headlines. Yes, the US SEC is retreating. Yes, the EU has trimmed its rule book. But more than half of global GDP is still in jurisdictions adopting ISSB. CBAM is no longer a thought experiment, it is collecting certificates. Several US states are coming up with their own climate regulations. And COP39 finally switched on international carbon trading after a decade of negotiation. The architecture has been built. From 2026 onward, the question for companies is operational, not philosophical. The economics has moved as well. Clean energy now attracts twice the capital of fossil fuels, not because of subsidies, but because solar at 4 cents and wind at 3 cents undercuts every new fossil fuel based plant in most markets. And capital is being pulled in the same direction by corporate demand as well. Over 12,000 companies have now stepped into the science-based target system. The transition is no longer a moral argument, it is a balance sheet decision. Three other signals worth naming. First, nature. TNFD has moved from concept to commitment. $22 trillion of assets have been committed in a single year. Second, insurance. When 92% of losses are coming from wildfires, storms, and floods, uh, the, the actuarial profession has effectively confirmed that climate change has stopped being a tail risk. Third, carbon markets. With ICVCM integrity standards in place and Article 6 being live, the architecture for monetizing mitigation finally exists. That is why we are gathered here today. Each of these four threads, regulatory convergence, physical signals, financial risks, and new carbon market architecture, is moving on its own clock. And yet they intersect on every CFO's and CSO's desk. Our panel today brings together practitioners who are working at exactly those intersections. For this discussion, we have a stellar panel bringing together a cross-sectoral point of view. We have four renowned sustainability and climate leaders among us today who have spent decades working on the climate agenda. The first one who is going to moderate the session is our very own Dr. Elena Primikiri. Elena is a partner with Unicus and leads our sustainability and climate consulting practice in the Middle East. Having spent over 2 decades across consulting, academia, and banking, she has held several senior leadership positions, including Global Head of ESG at VFS Global and Director of Sustainable Banking at Piraeus Bank for 10 years. She has extensive experience in sustainable finance, ESG strategies, implementation plans, reporting, ratings, and climate action. Elena holds 2 masters and a PhD from the University of Michigan and Harvard University. Before we get started with the discussion, I would like to make a few general announcements. We wish for this to be an interactive session. However, given the remote nature of the event, we have muted all participants. But please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A section. We have budgeted 15 to 20 minutes for taking questions from the audience. Post-curated questions are answered by the panelists. We will try our best to respond to every question that is posed while being respectful of everyone's time. While posting your questions, we request you to indicate which panelist is the question being directed towards. You can also direct a question to the entire panel if you choose so, but please do mention if that's the case. So without further ado, I would now request Elena to take over to introduce the panelists and begin the panel discussion. Elena, over to you, please.
Thanks, Ashish. Thanks so much. May I request Mr. Thakur, you can take down the presentation now, and may I request Mr. Thakur if you can turn on the camera, your camera, please. Thank you. So, thank you for setting the context so well, Ashish. It is a pleasure to be here with all of you today in the eve of the World Environment Day of 2026. For this important conversation for climate, from climate signals to business action. I think all COPs have been discussing the same thing. Enough with theory, enough with targets, ambitious goals, but rather get into the real action. So I would like to say that today I'm really happy to be joined by 3 outstanding leaders from sectors that are central to the transition: logistics and maritime, mobility, and heavy industry. So with me, I have Mr. Essam Sheibany, Vice President of Sustainability at ASYAD Group, Oman's flagship end-to-end logistics group spanning ports, free zones, maritime shipping, and last mile delivery. As an engineer, energy expert, and ESG champion for many years, 30 years, of experience across oil and gas, project management, and operational excellence, Essam is driving ASEAD's decarbonization agenda and its green hydrogen ambitions. He's also embedded in Oman's national net zero strategy, 2050 strategy, which gives him a unique integrated perspective from the vessel to the sovereign level. Welcome, Essam.
Thank you very much for the introduction.
Thanks. Our second panelist is Mr. Thakur Pherwannii, Chief Sustainability Officer at TVS Motor Company, one of India's most iconic names. And he's also the Vice President of South Region at UN Global Compact Network. So over 2 decades of experience, Thakur has shaped sustainability culture across some of the most recognizable consumer companies in the world: Unilever, Coca-Cola, Amazon, and now TVS, bringing with him a rare combination of technical rigor and organizational change instinct. His flagship frameworks, the My Sustainability Index, My Safety Index, My Health Index, have become global benchmark in their own right. We are glad to have him here with us. So welcome, Thakur.
Thank you, Elena.
Our third panelist is Mr. Vivek Adhia, Chief Sustainability Officer at UltraTech Cement, India's largest cement manufacturer, the cement flagship of Adhia Birla Group. Before UltraTech, Vivek led climate and sustainability at BCG, worked with grant agencies on ACT grants, and spent significant time in the policy space with WRI India and the Institute for Sustainable Communities. He carries that consulting and policy depth into the operational reality and actually running a hard-to-abate sector at scale. Vivek, very glad to have you with us as well today.
Thank you so much for having me here.
So I'd like to kickstart our conversation with a question that it is for all 3 of you, something a little bit less structured, but a little bit more personal. In the last 12 months, we have seen some dynamic particularly the time has been very dynamic for businesses across India, Middle East, all over the world, between evolving regulations, geopolitical shifts, supply chain pressures, energy transition challenges, and increasingly visible climate impacts. Many organizations will have to rethink their long-term assumptions. So looking back, what climate-related development have been most energizing for you, and what has genuinely caught you by surprise? Thakur, I would like to start with you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. And it's a very important area which is shifting the entire paradigm. As per my understanding, when we have seen the last war of Gulf, the outcome of it has resulted into many of the technologies, including solar, coming in play. And I'm sure this war is also going to bring the agenda of decarbonization and alternative fuel to the forefront, and also make sure the energy securities are taken into account as a first priority, how alternatives can also be taken into a wide adoption to reduce the cost of adoption over a period of time. Uh, Last 12 months, we have seen the significant shift in terms of our supplies at a supply chain level. A lot of dependencies around the fuel has given us the knee-jerk reaction when it comes to the automobile itself. But thanks to our activities and the programs which we have launched over a period of time to increase and accelerate the renewable energy adoption and alternative fuels, to some extent, it helps us in terms of reducing that impact. Uh, but to a greater extent, we clearly see that that was limited up to the tier one of the value chain. But value chain is not limited to that. There is a larger ripple effect, which is there at tier two, tier three, and tier four suppliers. They are not able to safeguard themselves because of that impact. And we see 4 to 5% of the cost increase, which is coming in on account of this entire headwind, which is coming on our way. So it is more important that we not only continue to promote the acceleration towards renewable energy and alternative fuel, but also find alternative ways in terms of reducing the carbon footprint, material load, and reliable engineering, which has to come in play to rescue us. So that's the clear indication that uh, my job as a CSO is coming back again on the forefront, which we have seen in a mid-era somewhere lagging behind by not giving priority to sustainability, is again at a forefront. That's what is my high-level input to your question.
That's encouraging, actually, Thakur. I mean, being in the forefront, that's how it should have been, in the first place. And we've seen that even during COVID, how that would have helped a lot of organizations with the disruption in the supply chain. But Essam, from your perspective, I want to understand from your perspective, and being in the center of the geopolitical crisis, what is from your perspective something that has been more energizing for you and caught you by surprise, apart from the war, I guess?
No, I think it's also there is a lot of shifting in the region here. We've seen movement from people move away to different direction, different region, depending on their line of commerce, line of trade is shifting at very severely. You can see the businesses that used to be between the GCC and Iran have shifted to different GCC allies. We see that tremendous shift. Who are the allies with Iran now, who allies with other nations that have to shift. The change of with the Hormuz Strait blockade, we have seen a lot of companies move location from one to another. Other side outside the Hormuz Strait becoming more attractive now because of it, the value of having a place outside the Hormuz Strait and then move goods through road transportation becoming a necessity. But again, all the region affecting it and becoming like a war zone, and the insurance that come through it. It's also the challenge. Also, from the shipping and maritime business, we're seeing the big players, the big shippers. They don't want to the whole idea of more Hormuz Strait and blockade people not moving ships, that they have a multi-million-dollar asset and they don't want to take a risk even to make it go through it. This is where show a little bit shift on a lot of things in the region here, and that's affect businesses, affect direction, and affect strategy. What happened at the end of the war? We'll see a little bit lesson learned, a lot of lesson learned, and then that will be shifting how we exactly we do business with everyone around us.
Mhm. That's true, Essam, and unfortunately the end is not still there. So we're hoping to see the end very, very soon. So at least we can understand and learn the lessons as you rightly mentioned. Now, Vivek, from your perspective, how did you feel? I mean, how has it been the last 12 months for you and from for the industry that you kind of represent today?
So we are also as a shipping line, we also move around, but again we had 5 ships were inside the Hormuz Strait. We managed to remove only 3 of them, still stuck into the Hormuz Strait. Although our relation with Iran is very good, but again, it's not about the relation that you do, it's also about the products, what you're carrying, moving on. So sometimes the products belong to a non-aligning country, where it also give you a little bit a struggle on how exactly to justify that one. But we also see a shift. The trade, I'll give a good example. The trade between Oman and India have double, maybe triple because of that. And the reason why most of the goods and consumers that's coming from India used to go to different nations within the GCC. Now we see that they're coming to Oman as a first gateway of entry, and then you see they move through the roads through different different GCC nation. That we have seen a huge increase, maybe triple, maybe quadruple increase on the trade between Oman and India. That's I think benefits for both. But again, the challenge also we see that not the big maritime actually doing the transport. They are small shippers, the small ships or the dhow type ships where they can take a small cargo. They securely can move between the nations and moving on. But the big shippers, either they worry about their ships of asset of billion that are moving through the strait or too closer to this region, or sometimes they have a policy, like there are some of the national companies like MSC, NYK, CMS, UGM. They have a policy that we are seizing our operation in this region. We don't want to take a risk. Then they leave the floor for small players who actually have 3-4 ships and they can move around. They don't worry about the war insurance. We are far away from the zone. We're going only to the Omani ships and they are getting a benefit. So in the last 3 months, I think these people have managed to secure their full year income by taking this advantage of that reason.
Thanks, Essam. This is really interesting to see how things will evolve. Now, going to you, Vivek, I would like to understand from your perspective, what is your understanding of how things are shaping in the last 12 months, from the cement industry perspective.
Sure. I think the most energizing or impactful thing has been me joining UltraTech 6 months back, and after spending about 2 decades in climate and sustainability, I have seen different phases of how this has kind of worked around. We started this entire journey with the advocacy and awareness building, and then there was all of this mid phase about ambition setting, and then most recently it's all about quietly doing your stuff, getting into the action mode, getting into the implementation, actually getting things done and doing it. So what I've seen in the last 12 months is many of the initiatives are moving beyond just the talk and doing the right things or saying the right things, versus actually embedding this deeply into the core way of operating things and stuff. So 3 signals have converged. And I won't talk about the geopolitics or the war because we've already seen a lot of impacts for that. But beyond that, we've seen three signals coming up: regulation. And when I talk about regulation, except for a few geographies, most countries, states, subnational bodies, everybody's trying to make sure that regulation stays ahead of the curve. And the notable feature was last year's, Paris, the COP meeting, the UN COP meeting, where unlike the way it usually happens, a top-down decision-making, agenda-setting work, it was more like a bottom-up action agenda, different initiatives which are making things happen, kind of building it up and showcasing that what actually can be done and so on, right? Second is the capital side of it. A lot of finance is still moving in this direction, and especially in the hard to abate sectors like steel, cement, chemicals, oil and gas. A lot of philanthropic impact, commercial, blended capital is moving into this. And Elena, you might know this more than me, but this is a space where pipelines and pipelines and pipelines have been created and showcased. And you pick up any of the multilateral initiative website and you will know hundreds of projects in the steel sector or cement sector or oil and gas are waiting for their FIDs, final investment decisions, and getting a closure and things like that. The third thing that has converged is customers. And large part of young generation, Gen Alpha, Gen Z, the end customers are very, very actively asking for low carbon, sustainable products, services, are making very conscious choices to the way they are kind of consuming things and information and everything. So all of these three things, regulation, capital, customers, are no longer optional conversations. They are very, very integral to the boardroom. They are very integral to the way businesses are now thinking of it. And like Thakur said, the CSO's job is pretty important now. And it always was, but this is like a very clear embedded strategic role that is now coming up. I think also what has surprised me, while all this excitement is there and good things are happening, what has genuinely surprised me is sometimes we underestimate the execution challenge, right? Just giving the example of UltraTech, right? We are not debating whether to decarbonize or not, how soon we can do it or not. We are actually doing stuff and we are re-engineering kilns, looking at supply chains, looking at capex cycles, etc., that were designed for a 40, 50-year kind of a time duration. You set up a cement factory, it works out for the next 40, 50 years on their lifetime, and you follow a particular business model. But right now, this is fundamentally a very, very different problem. So the execution challenge of getting things done for today's world, today's environment, today's resources is very, very different. So if I had to just distill and close with one insight, the climate transition is no longer a strategy, ambition, innovation problem. It's an industrial transformation problem, and how we are able to get this transformation done at a pace that doesn't leave us behind would be very, very critical. So yeah, these are my opening stuff.
So thanks all three of you. I think we got a generation is going to be evolved, and some of the questions, anyways, you on right now, but I think we will have the opportunity, later on to kind of drill into. You talked about the cost, you talked about, implementation, you talked about supply chain, you talked about, the geopolitical issues. So how that will affect costs, how that will affect business decisions, and all of that. So thank you so much for that. Now, I want to go a step back and ask you about regulations, right? Because a lot of times regulations help in that perspective to kind of push the agenda, and force a little bit the implementation part. So the rules are tightening, and we've seen, across multiple geographies, this is happening. We've seen BRSR in India in terms of the reporting requirements, and other industrial specific, let's say, rules and regulations. And then, you see it happening also with ambitions and net zero targets and everything. So Essam, I want to go back to you. Global shipping sits at the intersection of IMO's tightening the carbon intensity rules. Then we have the fuel EU marine requirements and the EU ETS, extension to shipping. So we've seen a lot of, let's say, regulations. How is that, regulatory wave reshaping fleet route and customer strategy? And which of these is, creating the sharpest near-term operational pressure?
I think all of them have systematically applies the same systematically good pressure for fleet management. And actually, when you see it, is advocated by the big players in the market. So the MSC, the Maersk, the CMA, CGM, these are the big players in the market. They want to move or to get away from the small players in the market, to say either you follow our direction, where we big shippers, we also want to maintain, decarbonize the maritime business, or you just move away from the market. And that's why this is the IMO framework, net zero framework, is mainly exactly driven. So if you are a large company with a large fleet, but not believe in the decarbonization or not complying with net zero, definitely will pay high penalties. But a small fleet, maybe you can survive for a number of years, but again, if you don't change it, and it will becoming a challenge for this. But we understand that it's all EU driven. So some people said, well, if that's why you see the debate, the politics behind it. When last year when we went for a voting, see only European nation have voted yes for the regulation, while we see the non-EU regulation have voted no. They don't want this regulation to come up as an IMO regulation, and that's a debate globally happen because I said why you have to comply with very expensive penalties, while the US is still enjoying using the current fuel. But again, we'll see the geopolitics happening now within the regions also becoming future challenges. So there is a tremendous pressure. Even if you ask me as a maritime business, what is that the future fuel for the future? I can tell you there is no one choice. There is a multiple choice that you have to select from, and maybe it could be all the above. That's where make it very challenging now to decide if we want to go green, this is the fuel, and that becoming very difficult. The whole idea behind it is we want to decarbonize whatever way, and that's becoming if you don't get the solution to decarbonize now, that's why the maritime business finding difficulties to decide to vote yes or no, because there is no agreeable, this is the fuel will be available, and this is the ultimate fuel, unless there is a concession agreement that, yeah, we find something very close to the bunker fuel or similar price or the same cheap, will give us the same volume of energy, then we'll go for it. But again, that's not yet available in the market now, and becoming a challenge. So the regulation is mainly to stimulate this idea and thinking, but when will we decide, that's another challenge as well.
Well, I mean, absolutely, and I know a lot of shipping industries that have pushed for IMOs to delay the applicability, and of course, it's a power game a little bit there. But thanks so much, Essam, for your inputs. Now, Thakur, from your perspective, you talked about earlier about the supply chain, and and that runs through some of the most carbon intensive materials, in your industry, steel, aluminum, categories where, embedded carbon signals are sharpening. We've seen CBAM on inputs, supplier scope 3 disclosures, OEM disclosure demands. So from your perspective, how are you engaging with tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers? I know you mentioned about tier 3 and tier 4 as well. on their decarbonization, and its emission performance now is the emission performance of them becoming now part of your procurement criterion?
Yes, of course. So let's understand that in India, where we are right now located, where 95% of our production is happening from the three manufacturing units. These are based out of India, uh, and we sell this product across 90 different countries, where 75% of the volume is getting sold in India. And we are the third biggest uh, two-wheeler and three-wheeler producer in world. And 95% of our value chain is sitting 200 to 500 kilometer radius around our manufacturing setup. And in last 6 years, if we have to look at, our entire value chain journey was into phases, because COVID taught us a very great lesson in terms of having a self-reliance. And that's where 2021 to 24 was a phase where we tried to bring the entire value chain next to our manufacturing setup. Uh, to give you an example, in last 1 year itself, our value chain localization, we have increased from 93% to 95%. And we will continue to look into it, how we can bring it to 97 and apparently 100%. 24 to 27 is the phase where we try to standardize system and processes in terms of where we need to focus. Is carbon is the only element we have to take into account, or we have to look into all the aspects of ESG, environment, social, governance, because we don't want to be the next poster child like H&M, Apple tomorrow, where we are labeled with respect to, okay, you're focusing on carbon, but social practices are not up to the mark. And that's where our homegrown program, My Sustainability Index, came in play, which takes care of safety, health, environment, compliance, water, waste, energy in a very systematic manner. It's an objective, gamified version, which we have rolled it out across all our value chain partners. So 24 to 27 is the phase when we are assessing our tier one supplier, building the capability, making sure that they're going through various checks and balances. And as we speak, 90% of our value chain spend base we have covered through this validation and verification under My Sustainability Index. Today, we have absolute clarity that how this 90% of the level tier one supply chain proposition look like from the environment, social, and governance perspective. While we are in a balanced manner looking at this standalone proposition, which is going to be in a wholesome sustainability framework, inside out, outside in perspective. At the same time, there are three more levers which we are pulling in around our value chain partner. One is decarbonization. Second is water. Third is waste management. And we are syncing them in line with our global sustainability goal, which we want to aspire to achieve in short term, which is 2030, mid term, which is 2040, and long term, which is 2050. Having said that, we have given a clear indication to our suppliers with respect to how fast they have to accelerate towards decarbonization. What are the touch points and ways and means by which they have to be water positive, and also zero waste to landfill. There is a clear timeline around it. And also, these specific areas are baked into our code of conduct for the supplier, and sustainable procurement policy is in play. As we speak, 100% of our supplier have given us a sign off that they are committed to it. As we speak, more than 20% of our supply chain base, they have moved towards platinum level in our My Sustainability Index. 40% of them have moved to gold level in My Sustainability Index. And remaining, they are at a silver level, which means that they're progressing very fast towards that compliance. 6% of our value chain today is RE100, which means they have made a progress in a way that they have 100% renewable energy to ensure that they give that specific certificate to us, and we are verifying it and making sure that we increase this footprint. By end of this financial year, 27, we will have 15 supplier achieving RE100, 15 supplier achieving RE75, 15 of them RE50, and 15 of them RE25. Now, in this entire journey, we are also bringing in sustainable finance framework to accelerate that pace. We have unlocked that. Recently, we have carried out a 1 full day workshop with Indian and international banks to ensure that we give a value proposition to them, especially for MSME and SMEs, to see the accelerated finance coming on their way, to excite them and make sure that they take a stride to move in that direction. While these specific areas are going to help us reduce our scope 3 emission on upstream as well as on downstream, because it will unlock for not only upstream supplier, but also value chain partner at a downstream, which is, we call it as a dealerships, those who are selling our product across 90 countries. We are also focusing on cradle to gate embodied carbon footprint. As we speak, every single bike which we are selling across the world, we are looking into design for sustainability. That's where supplier is also helping us in terms of taking that stride. We take a pride that every single bike today have a design in a way that 95% of the components are recoverable, 85% of the components are recyclable, and 15% components already we have recycled content into it. And because of that, on the life cycle assessment mapping, 6 of our product today in India are certified type 1 eco-label rated. We call it as a Green Pro certification, which is first in class initiative at a product level. No other OEM in the world have achieved that mark. And very soon we are going to display that for our customers, so that customer also become aware. Like when you go and buy a product in India, there is the star rating with respect to how energy efficient is the product. Similarly, we want to change the trend of the market by making sure that we make customer aware and create that demand so that other OEMs also jump into it. Now, this will give us an upside on 2 sides. One, we have already seen that carbon footprint of this product is reduced by 20% virgin versus 15% recycled content. 2, it is going to give us credentials in a green credit program of India, where this is one of the lever to earn green credit under eco label. So we are creating an upside for the future where there will be a value to a carbon green credit. And we are also exploring and writing a methodology that if we are able to establish that this is reducing carbon footprint in a progressive manner, why not we get a carbon credit also into it? And on top of it, as a downstream industry by 2030, when we start to sell product in Europe, rather than paying a CBAM tax, we should take a confrontation, go and ask for a credit from the European market. When we are better than the BMW or any of the bikes in the world. This we call it as bending the line. And when it comes to closing the loop to create the ecosystem at a scale and achieve the economy of scale, we have established our own registered vehicle scrapping facility to generate the amount of scrap which can go back into the value creation system to achieve more and more circularity and reduce the embedded carbon also, which is cradle to gate. We are also making sure that all our suppliers are getting tagged to it. They sign off that specific requirement. And that's how our aspiration is to ensure that we have 35% recycled content by 2035. And that's where a lot of research is happening with institutions, where we are collaborating with startups, academias, R&D centers, and there's no opportunity we are leaving behind. No stone is unturned in terms of making sure, which is cradle to gate and get to action, where reduce the carbon footprint by lightweighting, fuel efficiency, alternate fuels, hybrid fuels, and various other ways and means are coming in play to ensure that we achieve the decarbonization. In this entire journey, value chain partners play a very, very significant role. And they are seamlessly integrated into this entire game plan of stretching the line, bending the line, closing the loop is the new value creation which we are bringing in for the entire organization.
Amazing inputs, Thakur. I think lead by example is what I think comes to my mind, because obviously you are way ahead of the curve, and definitely good to reflect on, because that's the only way that we can progress, right? Create the demand and kind of push the needle a little bit more and get it in the next step. So thanks so much for your inputs, both of you, Essam and Thakur. So on the one hand, we have the regulations who can drive the impact. But I think in your initial, in the previous minutes, you discussed about how can, net zero commitments hold us against, operational reality. So can these ambitions that we have about net zero by 2050, by 2060, by 2030, can they drive, all this agenda? And, post COP29, the world has now a sharper Article 6 architecture, and domestic targets are now under, increasing scrutiny. So that becomes a little bit more, I would say, pushing the agenda from a different perspective. So Vivek, I want to come to you, and I know that it is a question that you must have heard before. Cement is one of the hard to abate sectors with major emissions coming from the chemical process itself rather than just the energy consumption. So, as a CSO of India's largest cement maker, what, in your view, separates ambitious targets from achievable ones in a heavy industry? Are companies most often underestimating the build effort? So, for example, carbon capture sits at the center of every credible cement net zero pathway, yet commercial scale remains, rare globally. Where does the marginal abandonment curve, get geniusly steep? And what share of credible 2030 reductions can be delivered through proven levers versus ones still emerging? I think we've heard Thakur touching upon this a bit, but I want to hear from your perspective.
No, amazing. I think if before I get into MAC curves and abatement levers and achievable and ambitious targets and things like that, I think it's important to note, not many of us are aware that cement is the most used material, second to water, globally. So water and then the cement usage kind of comes in now. And it's also a high volume, low value kind of a commodity, right? So there is very little margin of, increasing the prices or something. So if you look at, and the way we operate in currently, we are in India where over the next 2 decades, we are going to see unprecedented construction activity happening. Nowhere else, any place in the world has seen. And we are moving towards this Viksit Bharat with large infra developments and goals and stuff. At the same time, there are these national commitments on NDC targets, and we have our own commitments on science-based targets and stuff, right? So balancing the demand of the material that's not just currently happening, but also expected to happen in future, versus doing it in a manner that is very, very sensitive to ESG and climate and sustainability and all is critical, and we've taken that very, very seriously. I think the difference between, you pointed it out, right, ambitious targets and achievable targets is a function of timelines, capital, and the chemistry associated with it, right? And over the last 150 years, chemistry hasn't changed. The process itself results in about 55-60% of the emissions coming in from the sector, right? So unlike any other industry or any other sector where there are alternates that exist, right? You can do fuel switch, you can change your efficiencies, you can bring in more circularity and stuff, go towards green hydrogen and stuff like that. But in cement, there is very little that has been done so far on the chemistry side of it, right? So if I split that into the timeline perspective, right? Currently, Indian cement industry is the most efficient globally because the low-hanging fruits, or the ones that I call the pure play abatement, proven abatement levers like thermal efficiency, electrical efficiency, substitution, all of them have been done, dusted. They are in the money right now. Everyone's doing RE substitution. Everyone's doing improvements in waste heat recovery systems and so on. So that is solved for. Then you go towards the slightly tougher ones in terms of, okay, can cement industry create a never seen before circularity platform, because it's also amongst the largest users of alternative materials and waste and other aspects. So getting that AFR to the factory at the quality and the quantity and the time that works out is possible, but slightly, ecosystem related work needs to be done and stuff. And then the last bit, after you solve for all of this, is the carbon capture, and the novel chemistry side of it, which we've all been trying to do. If you see cement industries globally who are at the forefront, everybody has a CCUS pilot. Everybody is trying to do some sort of electrification, some sort of novel chemistry exploration and stuff. And that part will need a lot more than what we are seeing currently from an ecosystem point of view and all. So if I split this between what can be done from now till 2030, these are all proven levers, and you mobilize the infrastructure, you get different players on board, and you start doing slightly difficult things like clinker substitution and supplementary materials and stuff, you will still reach to a particular point. But the core CCUS and uh, CCUS and the chemistry side of it is still a little beyond the 2030 system transformation bit that we are all staring at. And how do we address some of those aspects is how quickly we are able to address some of those aspects will determine the pace of achieving the targets or not achieving the targets and stuff. So splitting that, 2030, if you have operational excellence, if you manage your capital well, if you are able to engage with the ecosystem players, you will be able to achieve your near-term goals or your near-term targets. But for a 2050 net zero, you need a massive transformation on the chemistry side of it, on the carbon capture utilization side of it. And that will call for not just one player or two player working or innovating, but it will need an entire village to kind of bring about that change. Because we can capture carbon at our side, but how do you solve for the utilization if there is no value chain developed on that? Or we can probably invest and bring in that scale for novel chemistry, but how do you make sure that it is working in a manner that operates at not just 1 or 2 tons uh, per day capacity or something? Because UltraTech right now is the largest cement company outside of China in the world. It's 200 million tons per annum, and collectively it exceeds combined capacity of any of some of the large economies per se. So if you have to operate at that scale, how soon and how quick you can have like a reliable solution that's coming out would be very useful. So yeah, I think this is how we would possibly want to break it down.
And I think, I think you touched upon the two challenges, which is, of course, how you can decarbonize the chemistry, which is very difficult, on its own. I will want to go to Essam, and Essam, from how to abate materials to how to decarbonize logistics infrastructure becomes again another challenge there. So ASYAD's footprint spans, full supply chain, and Oman Zero Ambitions is, it's also very kind of small of a backdrop. So with assets spanning from port, maritime, and everything that ASEAD group is kind of activities are going into, where do you see the heaviest lift and the quickest win decarbonization opportunities across the group? And how is ASEAD roadmap aligning with the broader GCC net zero trajectory and the post, COP21 Article 6 framework?
I think the biggest, heaviest lift is our shipping or maritime arm. I think that's becoming one of the challenge thing because of the relative. There is a number of reasons or a number of factors that applies. One of them is undecided the future fuel to fuel maritime fuel, or the amount of emission, or because these are a large equipment with a large quantities, and they're moving a lot of fuel around the world and around the nation, and also they need to be carbonized. So these are massive equipments that use a lot of fuel. They are becoming the heavy lift. So there's a lack of visibility on what fuel will be the future. There's a regulation, we talk about it, ambiguity. There's only one part who's saying yes, and the other parts pushing back. And then you're coming back into, and then you said the investment. In Oman, we have adopted a methodology. You said we orderly transform into the net zero, and the word orderly means that we believe in a net zero, but again, we're still gonna do exactly as Vivek say. We're gonna develop our nation. We count on building to whatever existing technology available now, till there is a very suitable alternative solution or technology development that also drive innovation, new tools, new markets that could help accelerate this decarbonization manner. But without that, we still continue. We're going to see, maritime businesses produce only 3% out of the overall number. This Ashish showed us in the beginning, the overall net zero total decarbonization world. So 3% is a maritime. Either we kill that all 3%, although the number is big, but we can go for an offsetting those numbers by doing something alternative that can get us to the net zero. So you don't spend a huge amount of money on reducing 3% of the global CO2, while you can go and maybe on offsetting that by having some alternative fuel, alternative solutions such as mangrove around the world or some other places, or finding another solution that can help us, particularly the maritime has been there. But again, it's the option. We're happy because the option is vast, but again, the challenge is big. A few years before even that, it was the maritime business was classified as hard to abate business because it was very difficult to find what exactly the solution. But now the solution have developed, and now we see that, okay, there is a direction, there is a window. Few years, maybe 1-2 years, we see another innovation ideas is developed. We'll see maybe a new tools will come out, new technology will develop, not for maritime, but all the sectors we talk about, we're speaking about here in the session as well.
Thanks, Essam. Thanks a lot. So I'll go to the last question. Unfortunately, we have some time constraints. Time flies, I want to say. So I will ask each of the question to be answered in a little bit shorter time, so we kind of allow for 1 or 2 questions from the audience. So we discussed about about the ambition. We discussed about the regulatory frameworks, and ultimately it all comes down to cost, and capital constraints become a big challenge. So the question is, who provides it, in what terms, and whether the frameworks are mature enough to move at the speed of that the transition requires. So Thakur, from your perspective, investors are asking a very pointed version of this question to automotive makers right now. You talked about about ESG, and I've seen Tesla, for example, has been penalized because they were very good on the green part, but very bad on the social elements. Right, to your point. So what shares of your capex is going to the climate transition? What is it earning back to the company? And how is the auto industry being judged on the capex story today? How are the investors, the financiers viewing and funding automotive companies whose business is still largely depending on conventional gasoline and diesel vehicles rather than EVs and low carbon technologies? I wanted to get your perspective on that.
See, we are into the world where there is no paradigm of choice. We've already seen the transition started, and in last 1.5 year, EV penetration in two-wheeler market in India was around 6%, and last to last month it was 8%, and last month because of the war it has crossed 10%. And you will see this will continue to accelerate. And the assumption is that by 2040 it would be close to 45 to 50%, and 2050 it would be somewhere around 80%. But ICE vehicle will remain on this earth till 2070 for sure, because still the developing market, MIC and LMIC countries are not that advanced. So we have to continue to cater their demand with ICE vehicles, and that's something which will be one of the proposition in the mix. 75% of our capex is going towards flex fuel, alternative mobility solutions, hybrid vehicles, and the advanced technologies and alternative way of doing business. Like recently, we have acquired subsidiary called DriveX, knowing that in future, what if nobody buy the bike? What if people buy only second-hand bike? What if people buy only services, mobility as a service? What if people don't want to ride, they want to fly? So that's where we are looking into alternative ways of doing business, and that's how the capex is going in all these facets to make sure that we look at the headwind and converge into an opportunity as alternative businesses where we can latch on to and diversify the business. So within this 75% of the input which is going into it, it is around four big levers or buckets, we would say. One is flex fuel vehicles, which is ethanol, methanol, ethanol variants, blending, so that we can keep the pipeline ready for the future as government will scale it up beyond E20 to E25, E50, E80, 100, up to that capability. The second lever is towards electrification, and that electrification is happening in the complete suite of offerings. Not only the current iQube variant, which we have, which is number one in India in terms of the sale and 25% of our market share. It's about giving a bike which is of a lower strata of the market with battery as a service, so that we bring down the cost to the higher end of the market, which is looking at it as a luxury. From there to going one step further down, we have acquired 5 businesses in Europe, electric bicycle business, to also introduce into the Indian market, to make sure that the lower propositions can be given to Gen Zs and people with the mindset they need a clean mobility at the cheapest cost. So that's the second lever. The third lever investment is happening heavily towards hybrid vehicles, where you will see in future a CNG blending with existing fuel in coming play actively. And then fourth is about electrification, and some of the companies like Zapata in Europe we have invested, which is personalized electric drones. You can fly from point A to point B, in terms of making sure that the markets which allow you to have such type of absorption, you can see such type of technologies will coming in play. So the future is very exciting. The way things are changing, we are also shaping up accordingly. That's the only way. Otherwise, there are many examples in the past. If we don't learn from the histories and the examples of the companies like Kodak and BlackBerry and Nokia, will also be phased out. Will have no existence 30 years down the line. So that's how we say that there's a need of an hour to have decarbonization, integrate this into a business strategy, bringing in the value proposition which continue to reduce the carbon footprint and give exciting mobility solution to the people, is something which is way to go.
Thanks, Thakur. That's really helpful. Vivek, very briefly, because I think we just hit the hour, and we want much more time left. So, what does credible transition finance look like in practice? Like green bonds, green sustainability linked loans, and everything we've seen, being provided. How is is that something that you're looking into? And, is the Indian financing ecosystem still maturing, or it's already there?
No, I think the space is maturing quite fast, and the questions that the CEO, the CFO, the boards are asking is, can I get capital at scale? What will be the cost of borrowing? Is there a long tenure possible? And against which credible transition pathway, I'll be able to raise capital. And all of these pointers are now kind of, being very, very realistic, right? So the instruments do exist. In fact, green bonds, sustainability linked loans, blended finance, all of them have been fairly mature now recently as compared to a few years back. UltraTech has raised quite a few of these, it has leveraged quite a few of these instruments, and we've raised enough capital. Now, I think what is missing is, the availability of capital is there, the instruments or the structure is there. How do you really solve for the bankability of projects or bankability of solutions that need funding through some of these aspects, right? So I think what is important here is, are we looking at the right structure on the financing side, right? So if I look at, say, for example, risk sharing mechanisms for first of its kind technologies like CCUS, right? Who has the opportunity to fund a CCUS project? No mainstream bank in India would do that, because the technology is still waiting to be proven. You don't know how you will value some of these things, and then you'll work at it. So is there an opportunity for a first loss or a risk sharing or a performance kind of a sharing mechanism that can come in and ensure that there is some comfort for mainstream lenders to come in for first of its kind technologies like CCUS? The other question is also on the tenure of capital, and do you do it for 5 years, 7 years, look at an exit for 10 years, or is there a longer term 20, 30-year kind of capital allocation that takes place? Because some of these technologies are still developing and they will be amortized over a long period of time, and how do you solve for some of that? So from an operator point of view, it's very clear that transition finance is there, it's flowing. It's not flowing to the ambition, but it's flowing to credible execution pathways. So if you are able to solve for these structural challenges, use the right set of instruments, and structure your projects properly, many of them are reaching FIDs and final investment closures.
And I think financial institutions are aligned with what you just said, Vivek. So they are willing to kind of discuss and get the conversation going.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, all three of you, for your kind contributions. Unfortunately, honestly, time flies. We had in the pipeline to ask you more questions, to be honest with you. I'll pass it on to Ashish. I don't know if we have time for any more questions, and I want to be respectful of your time also. So Ashish, over to you.
So if Thakur, Vivek, Essam, you're all okay, maybe we can go 5 more minutes and ask one question to each one of you. I know there has been very enthusiastic participation from the audience, so there are many questions, but probably we won't have the time to address all of those. So maybe we can go one question per panelist, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, I think it's fine with me, yeah.
Perfect. So I'll start with Thakur. One of the questions that has been asked, and this is pertaining to your response around value chain. The question goes, how can this approach be scaled across other sectors in India through your supplier and value chain ecosystem? What are the key enablers, incentives, or market signals that are required to drive adoption at scale?
See, the first thing first is it should be at an industry level, or let's say if it is automobile itself, all automobile OEMs should come together and work on it, because our supplier is also the supplier for another OEM. And if we have to put this in play, all of them need to come together. And there is a classical example already exists in Europe as a consortium where all the industries are coming together, like PSCI, Pharmaceutical Supply Chain Initiative, is one of that initiative. You can always refer as your academic purpose to see how efficiently they are functioning, where the big pharma companies coming together and setting a one single code to decarbonize the entire pharmaceutical industry, where India is a scope 3 of the world. So that is one. Secondary, the similar type of activity and work which is happening very soon. You will see next month in CI Greenco Summit. We are the first few companies joining hand together to bring that shift at a automobile level, to come together and amplify that as a power. We should not be differentiating ourselves that single standalone industry can shift the needle. It's a collective force we need to be brought at a industry level. That is the first thing. Second, please understand what work for one industry target group doesn't work for another industry, because for us scope 3 is a priority, for someone else scope 1 and 2 is a priority. So it should be seen in a different lens, in a different way, and we have to address that. It can't be a cookie cutter approach. But yes, few of the areas like drafting specific standard, complying to law of land, and also making sure that adequate levers are built into it and gamified, and then you drive it for the specific industry is very much possible. Framework can be deployed, but the ingredient into it would be very different. So it would be, I would say it is not cookie cutter approach. What we are doing in automobile will be very different. I'm telling you what I was doing 2 years, 3 years back for pharmaceutical, being into Dr. Reddy's, is not relevant what I'm doing here in automobile at TVS Motor.
100%.
Perfect. Completely resonate with that response, Thakur, and I hope that answered your question, Gautam. Now, taking another one for Vivek. Vivek, this question is more from a policy lens perspective and links it to execution. So the question goes, and it's a long one, so I'll try to, crunch it a little bit.
Sure.
The challenge, as per the participant, is not around policy design, but more from an implementation and market adoption perspective. So, what do you suggest? How do you close that policy formulation to implementation gap? What are some of the key levers there that could work?
I think first thing is we should really commend the policy direction and the way we are getting very, very clear signals. I think that's super important. Niti Aayog just released a roadmap on cement decarbonization. All the levers have been clearly codified and set in place. Every organization is trying to do their bit. The implementation challenge is more like what we were talking about earlier, is a structural problem, or how do you really solve for this, for what's in it for each of the stakeholder. And I will give a very clear one example, that the recent rules that have come in, for example, in India, if you are an urban local body and if you're in close proximity to a cement industry, all your MSW, municipal solid waste, will be treated at the cement factory, and there is some transaction that is supposed to happen. Now the question is, for a urban local body, it is termed, or it is a waste, it's a disposal problem, and how do you solve for it? For a cement industry, it is replacing the fuel that will go into its kilns and its operations. So the waste suddenly changes color into, okay, it's a fuel, and therefore I will need it at a very different specification, silica content, moisture content, calorific value, and everything else. And then the business model for players in between who are able to convert that waste into fuel that is usable for a cement industry, the commercials have not been yet solved for, right? So who pays for it? Does the industry pay for it? Does the urban local body pay for it? What will be the margins that the middle innovator or the entrepreneur will kind of work at it and all? So I think the direction is right, the intention is there. All that is now required is for all key stakeholders to come together, clearly lay out what the challenges are, and solve for the implementation. And we are now seeing that happening in very, very clear specific areas of work, and it's not too far out that we will see results as well.
Perfect. Thank you. And my apologies, I'm rushing it a little bit, but last one for you, Essam. And very quickly, maybe within a minute, a question asks about what decarbonization initiatives besides fuel blending and solar are currently being considered in the shipping industry.
We also actually, we have tried a new technology, which is we go back to the old school where we used to sail with wind. We have we call it rotor sailor. It is one of the new technology we demonstrated in one of the ships, and we have seen very good saving of fuel, around 9%. So that's a good saving. And then when you calculate 9% of fuels throughout number of trips you do throughout them, that's huge saving. 300,000 of tons of fuel that been saved. That in one ship, in one fleet. Now imagine that you replicate these ideas in a number of ships. That will help. Will help us to accelerate all the way till closer to 2040, where an alternative fuel been found and then a solution to them. But we have rotor sail, we have tried one technology, we have even nano coating on the top of the body of the ship. There is a technology called nano, but it reduces friction and also save fuels on the ships. A number of initiatives for the maritime business have developed, and we try them all, but we see we need to try for a year to see the effectiveness of that and the impact on fuel and on the decarbonization as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Really appreciate all of you joining us today. I must express our deepest gratitude to all the panelists as well as all the participants who took out time to join us today. I think it's time for us to renew our pledges, not just by making grand gestures, but taking really meaningful steps towards decarbonization. That will go a long way in making sure that this planet continues to be livable and sustainable for the generations to come. Really appreciative of all of you. Thank you, and wish you all a very happy Environment Day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.